All right, then let's get cracking. Thank you everyone for joining us on a Friday as we've sort of steeped into our fourth episode of Ideas with Ikigai. Pocket hospitals and digital doctors dissecting AI for health and wellness. I'm delighted to have Rajashree Menon with me to chat on what happens behind the scenes to bring AI and wearable tools to fruition for India to tackle some of the most complex healthcare challenges. But before we dive into the interview itself, I thought I'd just introduce the firm, the series, and the platform that Ideas with Ikigai has become. And also introduce Rajashree as well. But Rajashree, feel free to add on to whatever I say about your journey, in this industry. At Ikigai, we are a technology-focused law and policy firm. We work across sectors: edtech, health tech, drones, AI. We love to get into the weeds of how the tech works. It makes us better lawyers, and that sort of was the underpinning foundation for why Ideas with Ikigai came to be what it is. It was sort of an attempt for us to become better lawyers, but also to educate generally the legal and policy community, so we can push for better laws, more balanced laws, things that actually make sense as tech advances. And today we're doing that in the healthcare space and with AI and wearables. And I'm delighted to have Rajashree. Rajashree has about over 2 decades of experience, in the pharma and in the medtech space. She has a very interesting profile of having worked largely on acute disease and chronic disease portfolio products and services. So very, very interested to unpack that and what that means, also just for her views on regulation, on product development. And currently she is the Director of Innovation at GOQii, which is a chronic disease and wellness firm that has a bunch of products, bunch of services targeted to help patients, customers manage their health better, access good resources and support to manage their health. But with that, I'll stop and sort of allow Rajashree to kind of come in and maybe share a little bit about her journey, on how she first sort of transferred from pharmaceuticals to medical devices. But then more than that, what is her sort of vision, or what is her idea of AI and healthcare, and the promise it kind of holds? If you could paint a picture of what AI and healthcare looks like in the future, I think we'd all be happy to hear that.
Sure. Thank you very much at the outset, Ikigai and the team here, to have me discuss something very interesting on a Friday evening. Thank you for the introduction as well. Yes, I have been in the pharmaceutical sales and marketing for almost 2 decades and did a transition last 5 years to digital health. So, all disclaimers on the table first. We are talking to, of course, a law company. I'm also an advocate, but I'm a patient advocate. And that being a very important aspect of my life, I could see how digital can actually bridge the divide between those people who have got a lot of information on how to manage their conditions and people who have absolutely no idea how to go about it, especially in the underserved communities. Being in pharma, I had a ringside view of the healthcare and an intimate understanding of the pharmaceutical industry and, of course, the hospitals and the doctors. The sight was not very pretty, I must say. The patient is supposed to be center stage. Is supposed, and the decisions which are taken for the patients on behalf of all these stakeholders are supposed to include the patient voice, as of course, including the commercial considerations as well. But I found that the patient is alone. We have all been there as a patient or as a caregiver. It's a isolating play, an isolating space, and there's a lot that can be done to bring the voices up center. So that was, I think, the access to information which should be available for everybody, especially the patient, irrespective of the economic class that they come from. That is something which drove me to move into the area of digital from the comfort of an industry that I've been with more than 2 decades. As for the scope of these technologies, and I think we will be delving more deeply into each one of these parts much more. But I must say, this is a very exciting, a bit frightening as well as, and a challenging time for in all our lives. AI has pervaded or permeated into almost every minuscule aspect of our lives at this point of time. But as far as the healthcare is concerned, and the kind of impact that AI is going to have is explosive actually. I'm very, very excited to look into these possibilities and see how we can and I can play a role in shaping the future where wearables and AI will take center stage in our lives. Excited, looking forward.
I think that's a very good segue into my next set of questions on product design and development. With the patient and the disease at the forefront of your considerations, how does that impact decisions related to the product design? Maybe you could use any of GOQI's products to describe how that life cycle of product development happens.
Yeah. So when it's GOQii, by the way, GOQii is GOQii. QII, it comes from Chi. Chi is force. GOQii is be the force. So I hope that is clear now. And the very first band that was introduced in the market was about 9 years ago. We are a preventive healthcare company. We started off with wearables, but now we have a complete ecosystem stack with all the aspects, that is nutritionists, mental health counselors, physical health, and so on and so forth, physiotherapists and whatnot, to enable improvement in the outcomes. But the very first band which was brought into the market had step sleep and the usual one. But as soon as the pandemic hit, we immediately brought out the smartwatch, called as a GOQii Smart Vital, which was a blockbuster brand in the country as well at that point of time. It was launched in a very timely manner because the vitals which are of interest as soon as the pandemic hit was SpO2 and body temperature. People didn't even know what SpO2 was before that. These two parameters became important, and blood pressure, of course. So our earlier bands, which had just heart rate and steps and sleep, now were elevated with all these features, including ECG. So, and these the GOQii Smart Vital, as a word indicates, is capturing the vitals, the metrics, which needs to be, relayed in seamless manner as much as possible to the doctors for them to make informed decisions for patients, because all of us were remotely managing at that point of time. So this became a very invaluable, smart band, a smart watch for benefiting the patients. So, in fact, we deployed it even for the frontline workers, the police officers in Maharashtra extensively, and they were being monitored through a central command center, and who were keeping the people with elevated heart rates or consistent elevated heart rates at home, so that they are safe and secure. GOQii ECG band is another such product which we developed, especially for patients with arrhythmias. Arrhythmia is where there is a disturbed heart rhythm, and for stroke patients, because having suffered a stroke, there is a very high risk of stroke in the future, especially if they don't keep their cardiac conditions under check. So a GOQii ECG feature on the band warns the patient that the heart rate is elevating, or if they go into a fibrillation, which is a very elevated heartbeat, atrial fibrillation especially, it will immediately buzz the patient, and the patient will be asked to go and seek help to the nearest doctor to get the ECG done and the checkups done immediately. So the triaging of the patient is immediately done, and so on and so forth. And the whole, I will expand on it in a subsequent, point of discussion as well. But here I should mention one important thing, that the products that are developed in this market, a lot of products are very tech-driven products. And no offense to techies, I respect all the work that they're doing, and I'm a semi-tech person myself now. But the fact is that the product should take into consideration that you're going to fill a very clear need gap. The price point sensitivity is to be considered, of course, and the fitment has to be considered. For example, I got pitched recently by a company who wanted to develop a product for AI solution for schizophrenia, but they had a wearable as a pivotal, playing a pivotal role for capturing the vitals. It's known that in schizophrenia, depending upon the the stage that the person is in, they don't like being controlled. They anyway feel that there is a certain amount of monitoring happening. They don't like to be monitored. So bringing a wearable into the center of this solution, though it is important to capture the vitals, but there has to be some other way of managing that. Yeah. So the fitment was not there for the product. So we need to bring in all these. And that's also because a lot of these companies, tech driven companies, they have tech guys who are in the driver's seat, but they also need to collaborate a lot with the other stakeholders. That is of course, the patient, then the medical device companies, or the pharmaceutical companies, or the healthcare providers, that is the doctors, to create the best possible solution for the improving the outcomes for the patients.
No, that's a very interesting perspective. Identifying a gap or need, identifying the specificity of the disease and how it's manifesting. But how would you include that in the product design? What kind of feedback or mechanism do you have as a business when you're designing a product to get, say, a doctor's inputs or to get a patient's input? What kind of role do they play?
See, they play an extremely pivotal role. So even when we decide on a product, like we are now working on a very interesting product, first time in the country, in the space of dermatology, an area where chronic conditions abound, and like psoriasis, eczema, psoriatic arthritis, you name it, and all the problems are visible, unlike the non-communicable diseases where everything is internal. Here's everything's visible, and they have to take medications for a really long period of time. So moving to the product design, first is that you need to have a very clear guidance coming from the healthcare providers. They are the ones who are closest to the patients. They are the ones who are monitoring these patients day in and day out, and whom the patient is completely reliant on. Yeah. So bringing in a key opinion leader or a person who can shape the conversations in that space should be brought. They play a very pivotal role, and creating an advisory board of these important doctors, in this case dermatologists across the country, is important. Okay. And again, geographies have to be considered. So 3 or 4 of them, a mix of them, would be super. But one person should be kind of helming the project. Then, of course, the patient journey. The patient journey is very critical. We need to understand the absolute pain points that you are going to solve for. And we also need to consider what is going to be the pain point that has been solved for the doctors. So, in case of dermatology, the pain points that is getting solved is a lot of tracking, the scores which have to be kept for every patient so as to track the progress of the condition. And these conditions go on for life. So, the tracking is very tedious in such cases, depending on the body area affected, how much improvements have happened. Visualizing how much of the body parts are getting impacted. All these aspects have to be now driven, of course, now tech driven. So the scoring becomes extremely convenient, and it is visible for the doctors that how seamlessly the patient is progressing, and the report is seen in front of them. So bringing in the patient voice to understand their requirements, the doctors to understand the HCP pain points, and aligning the incentives for the doctors as well. These are aspects are very important. And of course, last but not the least, the tech guys. The medtech team then kicks in after we get a very clear understanding of how the product is and what the flow should be, and then they go on to the execution phase for it. Post
Rajashree,
execution, sorry.
yeah, no, you mentioned the term scoring. Could you unpack that a little bit? What does
Yeah.
that mean, and how do you arrive at those scores?
So, in let's say psoriasis or for dermatitis kind of patients, there is something called as CORAD scores. So these are, and then there are sleep index scores. So these scores are based on specific questions, and those questions they have this kind of objective type questions. So you answer those questions, and accordingly a score is derived. How much of the area is affected, how much of these symptoms, and these symptoms, the severity of the symptoms are captured, visually you see how the affected area looks like. On the basis of all this, a score is derived and the tracking of the score happens. Similarly for sleep. So these scores they do take up a lot of time for the doctors. And now what we have done is we have created an algorithm for that, so that it's very seamlessly tracked. In fact, we have made it so simple that a patient sitting in the house with the help of the nutritionist, the coach, can create that, can do the scoring on their own. It is saving a lot of time of the doctors so that they can focus on what is most important. And the most important thing in these kind of diseases or disorders is what comes from the doctor or the kind of challenges that the patient is facing on a day-to-day basis. If he has a way to voice it in front of the doctor gives a solution. That is the most important piece of advice. And you know how doctors are not able to spend much time with the patient. So they should not spend time in all these things. They're taking away that burden.
No, that's very interesting. And I mean, I also see why you need key opinion leaders or a board of medical professionals sort of advising through the process. What role do they play? And this is kind of deviating from some of the questions we thought of, but what role do they play in stress testing these algorithms? Like, do they have a say in sort of post-market surveillance? Where do they come in once the tool is rolled out?
So we are in the space called as digital therapeutics. Okay. So GOQii's healthcare business, and GOQii has got multiple businesses, but the healthcare business in the space called digital therapeutics. What is digital therapeutics? It is something which is working complementary with the prescription that the doctor has recommended, but it is something which is evidence based. So here we have a nutritionist who is there on the platform. We have mental health counselors on the platform, physiotherapists who are on the platform. And if you're taking care of, say, psoriasis patient, for example, or it could be a diabetes patient or whatever. So you've created a solution, a diabetes care program or a skin care program. And we have the doctors who have made all these, recommendations, and the product has been created. It's right. The first thing that we do is we do a clinical study. The idea is that you need to capture the evidence. You need to know that the entire ecosystem which has been created with all these inputs will actually solve for a problem and will improve an outcome. The scores will come down. A sleep index will improve. So that has to be seen. And so that's the stress testing, as you say. In our case, it's a clinical study. So we do a clinical study in a reputed institution. We collate the data. This data is then shared with the broader doctor population through association meetings and through global meetings where they will then showcase the kind of work that is being done in India. So yes, stress test is done through the clinical study, and on the basis of that, we are then talking to multiple pharmaceutical companies, because this business is largely a B2B business, a B2B2C business. So then we talk to the pharmaceutical companies and we onboard them onto the program, and say, because they are the ones who will take it to a larger mass of doctors and a larger mass of patients.
So as I understand it, there's human in the loop at every stage when it comes to product conceptualization, creating the product, even stress testing it. There's a lot of human intervention and sort of feedback on how good the product or service is. That's pretty cool.
So it's high tech and high touch. That's what I always say. It's high tech and high touch. We need to have a mix of both in the product, and then the product becomes successful. Like the work that we're doing at the level of BMC, So like high tech, high touch.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. I'll sort of now pivot to, okay, we have the product, we have, the buy-in that it needs to get into the market, but how do you now sort of, you've already answered a part of it in terms of the data sets that you use to sort of train your wearable or train your AI algorithm. But now with India's new data protection law and with generally global data protection norms being as such, how are businesses, looking at the question of protecting patient data or protecting, health research data and sort of harnessing it safely for this kind of product development?
Got it. See, first of all, understanding basically navigating this fine line between harnessing the health data for AI development while also ensuring privacy and compliance with India's data protection law. It's a complex challenge. Let me put that on the table first. Understanding the data protection law, that is a personal data protection bill, is of pivotal importance. Classifying the health data that we are now using into different types based on sensitivity, based on the necessity, and personal health identifiers, especially the name and addresses and such, treated with utmost care and subject to very strict access controls. We have to obtain clear and informed consent from the patient so they know where the data is being used and for what purposes the data is being used. Transparency about the data usage is absolutely important. Data anonymization. Here was an important aspect that all the stakeholders that we are working with, be it the pharmaceutical companies, they are not supposed to have the patient data with them. At any point of time, they're not supposed to directly access the patient data. And that is important. And it's part of our, I think, in a broader, in the data protection as well, and as well as the medical devices bill. So data anonymization is important. The data can be shared of the respective patient only with the doctor, the respective doctor who has connect with the, because they need to have the seamless data. Data minimization. This is very important. We're very greedy for all kinds of data. It makes the whole journey for the patient extremely painful if you're going to take a whole lot of data. So data which is absolutely required are the ones that we need to capture. And of course, I must consider the regular audits that need to be done, the ethical consideration of the implications that our AI project or the wearables have. And last but not the least, have the legal expertise on your side. Seek legal counsel, those with expertise in the specific area of data protection, to ensure that the practices of the company is aligned with the law and to navigate any potential legal challenges which would come in the future. I think we have to get set with all this. And here I must mention that companies who are, of a certain turnover, they are aware and they are kind of compliant. But there's a large number of companies who are in the space of AI, in the space of wearables, in the space of wellness. The area around data protection and all has not really come to the top of their priority. It needs to be, but it's not yet there.
No, that's fair. That's a very interesting perspective. I guess the sort of second track that I wanted to bring up was, like you said, the medical devices law. There's a new bill in the works, and there's a lot of sort of confusion on how to comply with what we already have right now. What has sort of your experience been navigating India's medical device rules, and just generally your I sort of thesis on companies complying with medical device rules within AI and medical devices?
See, we are new to this party, actually. Wearables have typically been kept, especially, see, the wearables are of different severity. Those who are simply tracking the basic steps and sleep versus the ones who are tracking something which is very high end, ECG, EEG, those are different kind of wearables. So we are now new to the party and now we come under the ambit of the medical devices. So first of all, the rule book is not very clear. We don't know where the classification exactly, where exactly are we supposed to be, A, B, C, D. Okay. That has to be clear as to.
This is the risk classifications you're saying.
Sorry?
The risk classifications.
The risk classification, yeah. Where do we start? See, basis on A, B, C, D, then you decide, right? And then there are different deadlines for different grades for obtaining the import license and other mandatory things which come from there. Now we know that almost all the wearable devices which are capturing any specific vitals need to have CDSCO approval. And again, this knowledge is not permeated down to masses of AI products and terrible wearable solutions which are out there. It's a very small percentage of people who have knowledge of it, especially the ones who are in the high end, one like the ventilators and the sleep apnea machines and others. They are all very aware, and they know what to be done. But the people like who are in the wearable space and less severity kind of less risky kind of products or the conditions that we're managing are applications which are helping people improve their outcomes for diabetes, for hypertension, for heart failure, and so on and so forth. Where do we stand? There's a bit of ambiguity over here. We are all not very clearly aware, but we know at GOQii, of course, we have gone ahead and made the application and going through the due process at this point of time. But there's a lot of lack of awareness in this space. A lot needs to be done. And the recent APAC Med, when I was present over there, and it was very clear that a lot has to be done. So we are looking forward to that.
Yeah, no, one of the reasons why I brought up this question was a while back, the CDSCO had released a list of functions that should be classified as medical devices under various risks and should get medical device approvals accordingly from either the state or the center. And it's interesting to hear that, the level of awareness on these sort of requirements, the reporting requirements, the manufacturing standard requirements, all of that may not be fully clear, with the wider industry at large. That's an interesting insight. I also wanted to pick up on, again, within the medical device framing, right? There is some amount of trust that you have to be able to demonstrate both with doctors and with patients that, your medical device is working, that your AI is working as intended. So let's take the example of an ECG feature within one of the smartwatches that GOQii makes. How is that trust and reliability communicated to, the doctor who's sort of prescribing it, maybe to the doctor or to the patient or the end patient itself? How would businesses navigate that communication? Because India is a very diverse country. Digital literacy is also an issue. So how does that dynamic work?
See, if you're working in a B2B space, that things are far more clearer, okay? Because you're working with doctors. The doctors first have to be made aware of the product, like the ECG. GOQii ECG was launched with the Electrophysiologist Association of the country, with all the electrophysiologists who had gathered together in Delhi, actually. They were made aware of the product, and there was a presentation as well by the doctor. The need of this such kind of product was very clearly established over there. So the doctors who are taking care of ECGs, they know the product is there, it has arrived. We arrived in the market ahead of Apple ECG feature. So Apple ECG feature was launched in US, but it had not yet reached the Indian shores. Okay, so we have developed it in partnership with Tricog. Tricog is one of the world leaders, global leaders in virtual ECG space. Okay, so creating the right awareness, creating the awareness among the right audience, that is the doctors, is most important, because they are the ones who are recommending to the patient then that you have arrhythmia, your heart rhythms are going awry, so you need to have something which will tell you. It is silently sitting on your wrist, and it is going to tell you whether the heart rate is going up and down. If there is a palpitation, they know, they keep getting palpitation. If the palpitation, which is unusual palpitation, then immediately just check your ECG. And that ECG, just send it to me, because this ECG, which is taken through the watch, it can be immediately sent via a shareable PDF to the doctor via WhatsApp or Gmail or whatever you want. So immediately the doctor can look at the report and see what's wrong, because it detects tachycardia, bradycardia, and fibrillation. So at the point of care, at your home, when you're sitting and you suddenly find yourself feeling uncomfortable, you just check your ECG and send it across, right? Then time to time, what we do is stories. We do stories of patients. We detected 5 atrial fibrillations so far in the country. And atrial fibrillations means that there is a direct risk of stroke or cardiovascular accidents, which we are seeing so much in the younger population. These stories, which are then popularized in the lay press, in the lay media, again help to create awareness amongst the lay public also, So there is a feature available for people with vulnerable conditions like arrhythmias. And here, what we do is that the moment an atrial fibrillation is detected, immediately a call goes from the company to the patient saying that, have you taken, you need to seek care. A call goes from TriCop to the patient saying, we have detected an event, you need to seek help. Then triage the patient. So if the patient doesn't have an access to the doctor, we need to help him get the access to the doctor to close the loop as well.
And at the back end, the sort of stress testing of these, the detection, the correct detection of the different atrial afibrias, that is again something that the knowledge leaders or your medical, your partners, they help you refine the algorithm, or they work with the tech team for that.
Yes. So of course, it was given to the doctors as well to give it to the patients, and they did test a normal ECG which is coming with an ECG, a 12 lead machine as well. And they also, in fact, one of the persons whose atrial fibrillation was detected was himself a doctor. So he was in Muzaffarnagar, and his son was with him, and they immediately took the ECG, and they found that there was indeed an atrial fibrillation has happened. And of course, the clinical studies which we are doing also, I have to mention over here that our watches are, we have done clinical study on these watches for all the accuracy for all the metrics, because these are going to patients. So these studies must be very thorough, and it must be done diligently. So yeah, it's all the checks are in place to see that the metrics are being captured and it is accurate.
I recall in one of our earlier conversations, you talked about localizing some of the content, hyper localizing it to make it accessible even beyond, say, the bigger cities. Could you elaborate on that and what that meant for the product design itself, but also, the AI algorithm at the back end?
Right. So this idea emanated from our project, which is a BMC project with Apla Davakhanas in Bombay. Okay. So the patients whom we are, whom we are serving are from the underserved population, and they do have the limitation with respect to understanding of languages. So obviously English didn't work. Hindi and Marathi are the two languages that they were comfortable with. So we had to convert the app into an app which is in these two languages. It's not a small thing for a startup, actually. So it requires a lot of effort to go in that direction. Second, we had to make the app light, because there's not enough space on their phones to take a fully loaded app. So we made the app light by dropping some of the features which would not very clearly benefit that particular population. Then we made videos. The videos which were disease awareness or condition awareness videos around nutrition, with the doctors talking about the conditions into again the Marathi and Hindi language. Secondly, we brought in WhatsApp, because this population was comfortable using the WhatsApp as compared to using an app. So the content which is very important for them to imbibe, that was relayed to them through WhatsApp as well. So, and they, like, you ask them to do food logs, they don't know how to put the food log into an application. So some of them knew, some of them didn't know. So then again, the WhatsApp became an important aspect of the modification which we had to bring into the product, so that at least they could put the food logs over there, and the coaches could all this data was taken and picked up into the dashboard of the coach, so the coach could see in a seamless manner, irrespective of whether it was put in the app or put on the WhatsApp. The data was anyway available for the coach in a seamless manner. So these are some of the improvisations that we need to do. Plus, we did group sessions for these patients. Now, you would normally think that, will they be ever interested in coming for a group session? To our surprise, all the patients who were engaged or active on the app, they turned up at the dispensaries to have these group sessions with the doctor and the nutritionist, telling them about why they need to inculcate certain healthy habits into their lifestyle. Nutrition is a big challenge in that part, in those income groups. Although we have access to the best of the foods, they don't have access to the best of the foods. So a lot of tweaking of the nutrition plans had to be done to see that they get adequate amount of protein. Protein shakes are not the option for them, so we have to look at protein which is accessible for them, and which they can inculcate to the life. So a lot of tweaks have to be done, and you can't use the app which you have created for an urban population into this cat. And similarly, when we are going to next do the in effort in the one of the southern states, again the whole lot of modification has to be done to serve that audience.
No, I think throughout the theme that's coming out is know your people, know what you're solving for, and keep testing and localizing it as much as you possibly can. I'm still very curious on just how easy it is to sort of work with the medical community to get this kind of feedback, to get this kind of specificity. If you could elaborate on that, that would be really, really, I think, helpful, because there's a lot of medical terminology, scoring, nutrition. There's a lot of things that are coming out of this that clearly you would not get if you were not, communicating with the medical community so closely.
Exactly. So here I will underscore the importance of the medtech companies to include or to bring in a diverse talent. We need to get domain experts in this space. We need to, if you are operating in the space of, say, heart failure, you're creating a solution for heart failure, you obviously need to have domain experts in that space. So one from the pharmaceutical and device space, because they have been the people who have been creating they may be drugs, but they are creating a solution for the patients. They know which are the parameters which have to be monitored for outcomes. Yeah. And to see that the patient does not land up again with a readmission and with a much more severe case after getting discharged. So monitoring of their rhythms, monitoring of their the lung performance, the walk test, which is 6-minute walk test, which is normally done for heart failure patients. It's something which is universally accepted. These are the things which show that the drugs are working. So you need to get these domain experts. Then you need to have doctors. So these domain experts can be doctors as well. But I would ideally look at a combination of people from the healthcare industry, that is from the pharmaceutical medical device space, and also the doctors, because the doctors do operate in their own space where they're clearly looking at clinical parameters and clinical outcomes and evidence. And the program, when we design it, it has to be in conjunction with these guys. So once you bring these guys together, then and the medical medtech guys come together, then we got the magic formula. And of course, last but not least, the patient voice, the patient journey. I can't overstate the importance of having the patient voice into this whole space, guiding the product design.
No, that's pretty cool to hear just the entire gamut of people that have to be coordinating to create a product for healthcare. I think the next sort of question that I want to get into is, like I said, there's a new bill in the works
Hmm.
for medical devices, and I was just wondering if you sort of had any experience dealing with foreign governments and foreign regulations for medical devices on AI and wearables, and what of that sort of experience taught you. Is there anything that we can kind of bring to the conversation here in India?
Yeah. I can't say my experience with this has been extensive. It's been just a month and a half when I got deeply into this space. Um, but what I've realized is in the US and Europe, they adopt a risk based approach for regulating the AI med space. This means the level of regulation is proportionate to the risk which is being posed by the device. For example, AI med devices that are used to diagnose much more serious medical conditions are subject to much more stringent regulation as compared to the devices that are used for less risky tasks like fitness tracking and such. They have placed a very strong emphasis on transparency and accountability. in the regulation of AI med. This means that the manufacturers have to must be transparent about how their devices work and how they use the patient data. Manufacturers are also held accountable for the safety and efficacy of their devices. Additionally, US and Europe are also working together to harmonize their regulatory networks framework for AI med. This is important to ensure that the manufacturers are not faced with different regulatory requirements once they go from one geography to another geography. So, I think India can learn a lot from US and Europe in these number of ways that we are regulating the AI med. The risk-based approach to regulation. The regulatory burden is proportionate to the risk that is covered by the device. Focus on transparency and accountability, and collaborate with other countries, the developed markets especially, to harmonize the regulatory networks. And I must say, and I have to tell you that this is a welcome. This regulation is welcome actually, because then if you're a CDSO, registered and approved device, then the acceptability of the device which is made in India, which it will have a global appeal. Today, if we were to take our product and go into these markets, they're going to ask us zillions of questions about every aspect of our device. But once we have the CDSO registration, CDSO approval, then I think we are very equally poised. It's a level playing field for us then.
No, that's very interesting. And yeah, risk based is what I've also seen with the FDA and the EU. I'm also a little mindful of time, and I have a couple of more questions for you, but I also know that people are pinging and wanting to ask you some questions too. So I'll try to wrap the last set of my questions up quickly. These questions are about unblocking some of the potential of AI in healthcare and wearables. And I think you touched upon a remote monitoring a fair bit here. The patient is at home, the doctor is in his, hospital and clinic, and they're sort of sharing information over WhatsApp or over, your dashboard. And that way they're able to maintain constant touch and contact on the patient's condition. But what about things like personalizing healthcare for a patient? Now, you and I both may have diabetes, but how diabetes affects me and how it affects you might be very different. There are standard medical protocols for treating diabetes, no doubt. But can a wearable or even the AI itself be so intuitive to make it personalized to me and to you, and we both get the kind of quality of care that we deserve? But also something like preventative medicine. You said a lot of the devices that GOQii is working on and has rolled out also help you track your vitals and detect things and alert you to conditions that are happening. What is sort of your vision for that, or what is your experience dealing with that?
Yeah. So, taking the first point, that is personalization of the medicine. Right now, the glucose monitoring in India has become extremely simple. I wouldn't say accessible, but it is simple now because we have something called as continuous glucose monitoring, which has reached our shores. And with the CGM, the sensors which are used in the CGM, you are able to understand if a particular kind of food or the particular kind of exercise that you're doing, what is the impact on the blood sugar level. So what happens is a nutritionist who is on the application and monitoring this data, and this data is continuously streamed and made available to the nutritionist. She's able to pinpoint and say which foods are triggering the blood glucose levels, which are spiking, which are what's the kind of composition of meals which are helping the patients keep the spikes under control. How is the sleep affecting the fasting blood sugar levels? How much time is the blood sugar level remaining within the safe levels, and that safe level is different for different people, and that is set, of course there are global guidelines as to what it should be, but these are the aspects which have been enabled by the sensors, enabled by wearables, enabled by the nutritionists. And here I must mention a point about the bots. Okay, there are a lot of applications which are using bots, and people have become somewhat comfortable with engaging with the bots. But I would always, like in GOQii, we use the bots, but these bots are artificial intelligence, I would say, is mainly to see, okay, this is the kind of patient, and this is the kind of lifestyle they have. So what should be the kind of habits that need to be prescribed to them, and the habits which are checked in a regular manner, right? So that then the nutritionist is able to exactly pinpoint and create a proper plan, a routine, habits which will then ultimately lead to improve, achieving the small goals and achieve the big goals. Yeah. What was the second point? I'm sorry, I missed that. Personalization
This,
was one point.
the second point was on preventative healthcare, because I know
Ah,
there's a big emphasis
preventative,
now.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So what we're working on myriad of things. Okay. So first and foremost, important, the holy grail. That is non-invasive blood sugar monitoring. The holy grail is right now to see we are 100 million people with diabetes in our country and another 100 million waiting to become. They're pre-diabetic. So the epidemic has crossed, all limits in our country today. So non-invasive blood glucose monitoring is something that we are very, very deeply working to. The other area that we're working is also in the area of virtual reality. How virtual reality can be imbibed into conditions which are, uh, the mental health nature, or conditions which are with attention deficit, or in conditions where where chronic pain conditions, where people are, they've got debilitating pain for years together, and this has reduced the quality of life almost to zilch. So, how can we improve the quality of life of these patients using virtual reality? And last but not the least, because we work with a lot of post stroke patients for rehabilitation, for mental health counseling, gap financing, and a whole lot of things in collaboration with pharmaceutical companies. So, now we're working in the area of stroke using VR in the rehabilitation, in the rehab clinics. So, that's a big thing that we're working towards. And of course, a lot more.
So, with the VR tools, how would you test them, or how is it the same process of, within the clinics, you're collecting information?
Yes, yes. So, yeah, see, in absence of anything better being told, this is what this the set of the protocols which has been already put in place for drugs, right? So we are just using the same model for the VR as well, or software as medical devices. The only thing here is that if I were to deep dive a little more, is that we don't have something like a placebo. So, in case of drug, when you have to prove the efficacy of a drug, you use a placebo. Here, what is a placebo exactly? So, those definitions and all are being worked out. And in absence of that, we use a product and see how the outcomes have been improved versus a regular, protocol where such interventions were not used, and what were the outcomes. So, comparison, that's the best way of, creating the evidence.
Got it. And I'm guessing here also with the outcomes that you spoke of, that is something that again doctors play a role
Yeah.
in verifying. It's not just say like a
Absolutely.
patient rating, yes, this worked for me or didn't work for me.
Self-rating, of course, is important, but as I told you, we are in the space of digital therapeutics, so you need to have evidence, and the evidence which is done in collaboration with a clinical research organization, an independent CRO, and the doctors. Uh, so that's essential. For no bias, there should not be any bias in the data that is being put out. But having said that, I must say that majority of the companies in the space, especially in India, the cost of clinical trials is too high for a startup at this point of time. So it's not everybody's cup of tea to put that kind of an investment in medical data creation. There has to be something that can happen, and I'm sure AI will only facilitate it. That the trials can be done in at a much lesser cost. That will involve more of these companies getting into it and creating evidence.
Got it. No, before we conclude, and I sort of thank you for like letting us pick your brain and get more insights on how products are designed in the healthcare space. I thought maybe if anybody here in the audience has any questions and would like to engage with our expert, please feel free. We have some time. Rutuja, for some reason I'm not able to see my chat. Could you just chime in with your question, please?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can hear you. Go ahead.
Hi, Rajashree. Thank you for taking out time today. I just had one question on, you've talked about several stakeholders that play an important part in the development of these products. Uh, who do you think, could you pick one and tell us who is the most critical stakeholder in the entire lot when it comes to making a product, which is a wearable or any other software as a medical device? Is it the programmers? Is it the technicians? Or is it the folks who analyze the data and anything else?
Okay, bringing the product into fruition, obviously it's the tech team, the development team, which play a very big role in designing the product. And I mentioned the stakeholders which are of importance in designing the product. It's the doctors and the patients.
Cool. Also, you mentioned that, unlike how in the pharma world there's a placebo that they can look up for reference, and that isn't what is available for the tech sector. How much of a challenge has it been in the past, and has the evolution been something that you feel like it's safe, or there's a long way ahead for us to find a replacement like a placebo for the medicine?
Presently, if you just go through the publication in India, and I'm restricting to this conversation to India alone, most of the studies that we have done has been on in a hospital setting on certain number of patients, and we have demonstrated the clear results in these patients in terms of outcomes. There has been no comparison with, other than, of course, if only the medicine is given, these are the kind of outcomes, this combination, this is the kind of outcomes that happen, and that is the beginning and the end of it. So it's not as if we can give a placebo kind of an app to the patient and they use the placebo app. And here there is an app with fully loaded features. Now, this is what is being done in the Western countries, where you have an app with very basic amount of features, and here's a fully loaded app which will help the patient. Here, the medicine is given in both the cases, of course, and that's one way in which the comparison is being done. But I don't know how you would give a wearable in such cases, because wearable is the same for both. I can't create a placebo wearable.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think I'd be curious, of course, to read the publications.
Unless you create a wearable with very basic features like just the steps and the heart rate, and here you have a fully loaded wearable which captures the heart rate, or continuous heart rate, SpO2 during sleep, SpO2, and everything else. Respiratory rate, stress features, everything is put into it. That could be one way of looking at it. Because wearable at the end of the day is a tangible thing which is there on the wrist of the patient, and that itself gives some sense of control for the patient, that I am taking care of myself to some extent. And that's a big boost by itself. So maybe that could be an answer.
It sounds interesting.
Thanks. I had a question. Thank you so much for the fascinatingly interesting talk and providing insight. I actually had two questions.
Sure.
The first was on the government's entire health tech and your sort of perspective on what the government's doing right and what it sort of needs to address in terms of both its policy as well as sort of implementation of the entire use of health tech, and in sort of advancing and universalizing healthcare in India, and what you sort of see as maybe a little crystal ball gazing into what is the future on that side looking at, and interplay with that, the use of emerging technology and AI and those features, and any comment on that. And the second, I just wanted to sort of get a little bit of your insight on the sort of role that data scientists and how the medical fraternity has taken to engaging with people who are traditionally outside of the medical fraternity, and how that engagement has been in the role of sort of data scientists and various other people within sort of the emerging health tech ecosystem, and the sort of roles they play.
I was trying to get the second point. You're saying that how is the data science evolving and including the people who are, when you say they are outside the realm, what do you
I
mean?
meant like, so the way health tech sort of come up and the engagement that you've had with people traditionally outside of the health sector. So for example, a lot of the data scientists that are coming in or people working on emerging technologies, how has the medical community reacted to that, and what has been your experience on that front?
Okay.
That was the question.
See, as far as the medical community, and I've had the opportunity to interact with them quite intimately on this particular topic. Medical community, apart from these robotic surgeries and those very high-end technologies which they are engaging with for making their life easier, but requires a huge investment from the point of view of the hospitals, those are technologies which are working. But it's limited in its usage because there are cost considerations. But as far as the community is concerned, there is a very low awareness about the emerging technologies. It's partly because they, as with any industry, they are more secure in the space that they are in and things that work. Okay. So awareness building in this space regarding the emerging technologies like AI especially, and the usage of AI, and not consider AI as an opponent but as a complementary technology which is going to help them in the long run, is something that I'm looking for. Like when I discuss with the medical with the healthcare practitioners on how they can use these applications, which are like remotely managing the patients at home, relaying seamlessly the data to them. The first question is, I don't have the time. I don't have the time to look into this data. Okay. Now, obviously, if there's a new technology, you need to make time for it. But consider the fact that the value that and this is something that medtech providers also have to look at, the kind of value that they're providing, the seamless data that they're providing, and the manner in which they're providing the data. Is it very easy for the doctor to look at it? They don't have to go through jump through hoops to just to get the basic data that they're looking for the patient. Like in case of blood, people with diabetes, they want to see the trend of the patients as a blood glucose level, and that should be seen right there up front center, and that is available. And the number of spikes and the way the spikes have gone out of control. What is the blood sugar level during sleep? Is it dipping too much? Is there a hypoglycemia episode happening during sleep? These are things that they want. And if you give them the data right up front and center, I think the adoption will increase. Right now, they are hesitant. They are not, and it's just probably not even 5% of the community who has used adopting to such kind of technology. So there is a challenge over there. The first part, I think you had asked about what should the government do more regarding, was it pertaining to the medical device bill?
Well, generally on the government regulation around sort of the interplay between emerging technologies and healthcare. And what do you think is the government doing right, or what is it that would be a key area that the government would like to focus on, or that you would believe that the government should focus on?
Yeah, so ABDM is of course the talk of the town, but I'm also aware that ABDM is looking for a lot of partners to come and join them, because the vision of having the seamless data of the patient across multiple points of contact that they have with the diagnostic lab, with the hospital, with the doctors, with their GP which is there next to them, and having this continuum of care that can be realized only if a large number of people come together. Today, nothing is mandatory, has been made mandatory by the government. It's all up to them whether they want to participate, get into their sandbox and demonstrate but things are not really reached out as far as the entire medtech and the stakeholders are concerned, and even the doctors for that matter. If you were to go to a hospital today and ask how many people have ABHA ID, I would say very few. But if you were to go to the dispensary and check how many have ABHA ID, all of them have got ABHA ID. So at the primary healthcare level, things are kind of getting integrated. There is, and I must appreciate the National Health Mission software, which is there at the dispensary levels, is amazing. a lot of data being, again, but it is getting captured in multiple applications. Nothing is seamless over there, but at least start has been made. But as far as the private participation is concerned, and there's a lot needs to be done. People like, even let me start with GOQii. We are not into the ABDA. We are present in the sandbox, but we've not done anything more than that over there. So all of us need to participate extensively. The government needs to really spread the awareness about ABDA.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Sorry, just on that point. Is there a particular reason why, because of the ABDM and it's such a it's envisaged as this very universally sort of public good that is going to be produced? What's the sort of hesitancy that the private sector has in actually engaging with the ABDM currently, or like, and I mean, where is that? What is that sort of based on? And
I think I don't have an answer to this, to be honest. If I were to look internally and look at the other people who are in the medtech space, and I think everybody's just watching the other person. Are they getting into it? The question is also, let me put that point up front, especially in the startup space, is what's the clear value that we're going to get at the end of it?
Right.
Like what happens is, if you look at Jan Arogya Yojana, or the insurance that we have, that's Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. One thing that the hospitals are lamenting and they're talking about is that they made us cut the prices. For elective surgery, the prices have been cut so drastically that it is unviable, and they are going to load that cost onto the people who are able to pay, right? So ultimately, the yojanas are important, but at the same time, I think what is important is to align the incentives. Now, for the startup world, the incentive is that how is my product going to go out there, and how my product is going to get showcased, say in ABDM, where I'm able to get more people to come towards me. Their awareness is created because it's a huge platform where crores of people are going to be, in one place. How are we going to, and I'm sure government has a plan and to how to create visibility for the early ABDM partners, but it's not very clear what their plan of action is. How is it going to roll out? And we understand the intent very well, but we're not able to see the very clear benefit coming out of it. So if we are made aware of it, and believe me, most of us would, will not, in a blink of an eye, will be in the sandbox.
Thank you for that.
I think we're also ahead of time. Thank you for the questions, everyone, and for participating. And Rajashree, big thank you to you. You covered a gamut of topics, a very wide one, including the discussion on the ABDM. I'll just conclude saying that two really valuable things have come out of this discussion. One, if you want to enable your pocket hospital or your digital doctor, you really need to make the health be a big part of health tech. And the second thing is you will need human in the loop at various stages of the health tech product development and rollout to make sure that it's working as intended, to make sure it's safe for patients and useful for doctors. So thank you for peeling back the layers of how a product is designed and how many different people you interact with to roll something out. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here. Bye.